morning. Thank you very much for inviting us to the Arc Marathon. We are proud and enjoy to present you one of our projects. This is Martin Pohl. My name is Isabella Leber. We have an office in Munich, in the south of Germany, and we are going to present you a cultural center in the northwest of Germany, very close to the Dutch border. Actually, the project started with an international competition we won 6 years ago, and it finished actually with building the last of the 6 buildings it's made of this summer. We started the roots of the project, which are in medieval times. You see a drawing here about the town Vreden in medieval times. You see that big Catholic churches are dominating the skyline of the old town, surrounded by small-scale housing buildings which arose along the city moat and circled by landscape and a river. You see that black line here, which is part of the kind of main idea of our project. You see facing gables towards the moat, the city moat, and the river, also exposing the small scale and the zigzag of the line of the housing.
How do I carry on?
How does it go on? Next slide. We don't know how to go on. Here. Go on.
Okay. Yes, here is the floor plan, the plan of the city, and as you can see, it's very much like Isabella described in medieval times. We have the original area of the monasteries. Of the monasteries here. There's the 2 churches with the monastery. That was a free area, and around it the city has sprung up. There's the marketplace here, and that's fairly dense. Around it there's a city moat and a water landscape. So the outside of the city is still fairly green and natural, as it was in medieval times. There's been the idea to develop 2 axes to enter the city. On the right, we have the axis which is the commercial axis. So this one here, that's where the shops will be concentrated. And on the left, there's a cultural axis that strings along various cultural activities, event halls and galleries, and not least our cultural center here. We've continued the edge, and we intend to strengthen the edge of the city like it was on that old engraving, by building our building together with existing buildings up to the monastery. So here.
So that's the start of the project. At the start of the competition, you see buildings which already existed. This is a 70s building, which initially was the house for the museum. The town had already a small museum, and here an extension of the museum, and for administration use, a building of the 1980s with all the kind of formal language of postmodernism. You see also going on, analyzing that system, that these houses do already what the skyline of the old medieval town did, rowing the gables towards the moon. Right? Again, you see this. And what we did then was to integrate these existing buildings in a structure to make a whole out of different houses, to bring together existing buildings with a new development, forming a big development, while still with embedding the existing housing in their identity, in the houses in their identity, in a new structure. First of all, with integrating it into a zigzag line of the roofs, as well with cladding it all into one brick and bringing it together with a basis wall on the lower level. Here you see how it is now.
And here we have the complete building. You can see how it's brought together by the city moat, the wall along the bottom, the zigzag of the roof at the top, and the individual buildings step backwards and forwards to assert their individuality. They have there's angled to each other according to the existing buildings. And we've brought a brick facade over the whole building, which has been baked in different temperatures, so that we have subtle differences between the individual buildings. Again, one big building divided into small buildings. And here, as we walk a little bit from the right, we have the 70s building here, which we tried to take elements of the original buildings, the detailing. So here we have the precast concrete lintels that we've taken into this building. We've tried to retain the function as well. So this was originally the museum. It was large areas, and it's now the archives. So essentially, as a building, it stayed in its function and in its facade fairly similar. So that has saved costs for the building. The same is for the old administration building on the left. That was the postmodern 80s building. We've taken the pilasters and the detailing on the eaves and also the arcades and such in order to reminisce from the old building as it was before. The main, largest part of the building is at the front. It's the museum part here. With its two gables, and it really binds into this cultural axis. The entrance is the entrance into the city. There, the bridge that you can see next to the over the river is where you enter into the city. You can go past the building or in through the building into the atrium that we'll see later. And these two big windows, the windows in the museum, which connect directly with elements of the museum. So the window on the top left is for the clerical, so the church exhibition, and looks directly to the churches, whereas the window on the bottom right is the exhibition of the town of Vreden, and it looks towards the old medieval harbour, which was the economic point of the city originally. Looking round onto the other side, this is the town side from the church place. We have a building which is a little bit more urban from this side. It's lifted up. It has 2 stories, like the buildings next to it. In fact, it's 3 stories, but we've lifted the 2-story building form up so that there's a slit underneath, and that opens the square so that the square really flows in through the building and through to the other side. You can really walk in through the building and feel that you're outside and walk out to the other side. We have the gables, the smaller gable to keep the scale down towards the front, and then it rises up to the back to become almost a reference to the churches, a clerical element, before folding back down again to meet the buildings of the 16th century and 1980s further at the back in the small lane. And the facades are also folded also in order to take up the floor plan of the medieval times.
So here you see the section, again, kind of our overall theme and idea is, in a way, to be a part of a city and still being a kind of dominant point without being in competition to the churches around. It integrates, you see the integration of the 1970s building and 1980 building, and you see it's a big shape, still being a part of the former fortification of the town. Going on the ground floor plan, there's another big theme our cultural center has. It's the theme of being a town in a town. And that derives from, first of all, being 6 buildings out of 4 centuries. Yeah, it starts with the 14th century former tower of the medieval fortification, then a housing building of the 16th century. Both parts are listed buildings. Then you see the footprint of the 1970s and the footprint of 1980s. In between, an educational area, which is new, and then the top front, the museums building. It's all around, kind of circled of an inner courtyard, which where you look from new building through the courtyard on the old building of the 16th century, and it's rowed along a very long internal axis which connects the museum area with the archive area. At the entrance area here, the internal axis is exactly on the crossing point of the external town axis, the cultural axis Martin talked about in the beginning. And there's a third axis, exactly at that point. It's the kind of vertical axis which leads into the exhibition spaces via the staircase.
And this is the staircase, so this is the pivot of the whole building, really. There's the access upstairs, up to the museum. Back along the axis to the left you have the landscape, to the right you have the town, and the stair takes people directly up into the museums, which are very open to the public life down below. And this centre is often used as a place for music and for discussions, has a good acoustic. As we go up the stairs, you can see the two different levels of the exhibition. So the first floor with the view out onto the medieval harbour, with exhibition elements from the town life of Vreden, and going up to the top underneath the roof, with the zigzag roof, you have the sacred exhibition, or the exhibition of church elements. Looking back down, you can see the stepped sculptural atrium, and the central axis is there on the right. It's a bit like a set of shops along a street. They're all set into a white facade, and the shops themselves, the tourist information and the educational facilities and such like are covered out in a yellow colour. Now we go back up to the outside for the last picture. This is, I think, a picture which a bit shows what we've been talking about, a lot of the themes. We have the materiality, the material, reflecting the material. We have the zigzag of the roof, reflecting the zigzag of the old town, also trying to bind one big building that is at the same time several smaller buildings, and the zigzag in the facade reflecting the organic medieval city. And then the big slit of the view from the big windows, the connection from inside to outside, and underneath the big slit, which really brings the entire city into this center, and enables this center to be really integrated into the cultural life, or the everyday town life of the city. Many thanks.
Thank you. I would have loved to see these images full of people. And so I want to ask, how does it work when it's full of people? How does this plaza, how does this museum has transformed the life of this place with life, no, with people?
Yeah. I think the first of all, we had the luck that the County of Borken, who's the client, he actually had a very long development phase for that project. Yeah? It was sponsored by the country of North Rhine-Westphalia, and so they had a long process to develop the whole project. And part of it was that it is not only a museum, it's not only an archive, it's also something where the tourist information of the town is integrated. You have a little coffee, and external learning spaces are integrated, so there is a life because of the structure. They also created new positions to bring really activity into the center, and it also to be used from all the county all around. Yeah? And they also made cooperations with Dutch areas, with Dutch educational systems, as well as this museum, which is right over the border. It's only 7 kilometers away from Holland.
And indeed, this space where the staircase is absolutely is very, very lively. When it looks, actually, you're right on the pictures. It looks a little bit. There's no one there, yeah. But it has this sort of in the floor plan, a bit like a church. You have seats. You can put seats to the left, seats to the right, and seats down the axis. And then you have a band in the middle, and it's very lively. The quietness of the architecture in the background, or the massivity of it in concrete, is a good foil for that. For almost anything.
Yeah, and they have actually a cultural program there at least once a month. They're either concerts or readings or other kind of even industrial events to give activity, and also to integrate all the country around and the county around, because it's at the border and it's a small town, so the function is to activate the countryside.
It's a very poetic move to house 4 centuries. Was this part of the brief, or was this your response to it?
To house various different centuries.
Yeah.
A part of it from the 14th and 16th century were listed buildings, so we had to integrate them. And the other ones, it was actually part of the brief to integrate them. The question is to what extent do you integrate them? Because the brief actually saw that the museum was going to be on one floor, which meant that it would have had to have gone through both old buildings and a building in between and a building at the front.
But the brief of the competition.
The brief of the competition. We decided not to do that, and that was our plus point, I would say, because the buildings, as we said earlier, were able to exist in more or less the same functions that they had before. You didn't have to mow down the walls and change the floors and everything. In fact, we were able, with the administration, more or less to leave the same windows, the same parting walls, and so on. So originally, in fact, the idea was to actually keep the old facades of the old buildings, of the 70s and 80s buildings. It was a decision by the client, in fact, that he said, it's an old facade, it's leaking, we'll change it. And then we integrated it into this big kind of overarching idea with its subtle changes, which we think is actually also a good solution. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.